Hey guys, back again. So today we're going to talk about a little bit. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about staffing to follow up on the video that I had last week. And before I get started on some of the things that I wanted to express to y'all, so I have this book here. It's called The Influencer, and I took this course 3-4 years ago, and this just helped me develop better techniques on hiring individuals, as well as going through the process of developing an individual, as well as seeing the individual off to do, bigger and better things. And so with that book, they had a kind of a guide, if you will, through some different real world scenarios and how to apply. And we'll get into those videos. I'll get into the more intrinsic details of maybe some of the examples and scenarios that the book provides. So I got 5 takeaways from the video that I posted from last week, and we'll jump right into it. So interviewing is very important to bringing in a good culture, to establishing a good culture, to encouraging culture. I mentioned in a previous video, on the interview, you want to have certain questions, and I mentioned open-ended questions. So what I mean by open-ended questions, you want to be able to have the subject explain how they interpret the situation and what they did during the situation. So right there, as they're explaining, you can get a gauge of their time management, their logical thinking, different things like that. Also, you want to have behavior-based questions, kind of doing the same thing as the open-ended. You just want to see what is their thought process through the whole event or through the whole situation that they may have gone through. So for me, for example, I may ask, where or when you have a lot of things to do and little time to do them all, how do you handle that? And so sometimes the subject may say, I keep it all in my head. Some people may say I write some of it down, or you may have a combination of the two. And that's just an example. We'll get better with those. But the second takeaway that I wanted to show you guys is the size of the event. You need to understand how many people are coming, and then you need to have some wiggle room for extra attendees. Now, some of the times an event may have registrants, and so you kind of have a number, but then sometimes you have events that's open to the public. And so when you have events that's open to the public, you probably always want to give yourself a buffer. So for example, if you had a theater for 100, you might want to set the theater for 120. Just to kind of give some wiggle room. And sometimes the clients may come in and ask, can you add some more chairs? And so it'll look better if you've already added some extra chairs. And also you want to know or have an idea of how long it's going to take you to set this event. Are you on a time constraint? Do you have overnight? Is it later on in the day? You want to be efficient with your time, so that's good to know. And also it'll help with staffing, because if you have a short window to get the room set up, then you're going to need more people, versus if you had a longer time to set up, you need less people, if that makes sense. My third takeaway would be development. You want to develop your new employees, and then you want to continue to educate your veteran employees. One thing that I like to do with my new employees is team them up with the veteran employees and have them kind of shadow. And with my older employees or my veteran employees, I tend to keep trying to put things on their plate, see where they are, see if they're losing interest, keep them engaged. That's what I've found to work best. And so, for example, my older employees or my veteran employees that work with me for at least a year, I may introduce them to clients. I may put them on special projects. I may have them run special equipment, just to kind of keep them engaged and not letting them think that they know everything. And another thing that I would encourage is autonomy throughout this process. I think personally that's the best way to get the most out of your employee. My fourth takeaway would be the layout of the land. You want to know where you're going with your team, and so you want to have some kind of specs on the room arrangement. You want to kind of have an idea of what the client wants. You got to have an idea of what the facility can hold. And then I guess if you want to add some personal spice, you can always do that as well. I know for me, I have a list of the rooms that I am in charge of, and I know the square footage, I know the exits, I know the carpet patterns, I know the room's direction. I also know if the room can be flipped into another direction. You want to be familiar with that as a leader of events. And to wrap this up, we're going to kind of focus back on the employee, as this has been much about, and leadership. Leadership is just not something that you can read in a book. Leadership is just not something that you can find on YouTube. To me, leadership is by doing. Leadership is one of those things that you lead by example. For me, I come to work all the time. I fulfill my duties. I sit down when I need to sit down, and I stand up when I need to stand up, if that makes sense. And I think that your employees will receive that. But you have to be consistent with your leadership. I think we've all probably had some terrible leadership, but ultimately, to be a good leader and to lead individuals, you have to commit to whatever it is that you're practicing or preaching. And so, once you understand that leadership, you start to take those pieces that you have and you start to put them into or implement them into the culture, and eventually your leaders will pick up on these characteristics and ultimately embody those characteristics over time. So be mindful of what you're doing as you're leading your team, or as you lead a small group of individuals. And lastly, I would say have good people on your setup at the beginning and have good people on your setup at the end, because the end can sometimes be just as hard, if you will, or just as crazy as the beginning of the execution. And I say that because after the event is over, people have generally, quote unquote, gotten lazy, or they may have, had dinner, and so you're a little sluggish. So you still want to make sure that you have your motivators. You still want to make sure that you're leading by example. So if you were with your team and all of you guys had dinner, then surely you should probably be the first or second person out there on the floor trying to show that work needs to be done. So that'll conclude the video for today. If you guys got any questions, please subscribe, please like. Xavotti Supports is my Twitter handle. Yeah.